He had built an empire without ever opening his heart. But one ordinary morning, a woman racing toward a closing elevator made time itself stand still. At exactly 5:59 a.m., Vincent Moretti stepped into the private elevator that carried him from the underground garage to the executive floors of Moretti Tower, a 48-story landmark overlooking downtown Chicago. Every morning followed the same precise rhythm. The same tailored charcoal suit. The same black leather briefcase. The same silence that wrapped around him like another layer of armor. Employees knew better than to speak unless spoken to. Executives adjusted their schedules around his. Even the security staff measured their words carefully whenever Vincent passed by. At 36 years old, he had become the city's most respected businessman, admired for his discipline, his intelligence, and the quiet authority that seemed to follow every step he took. Rumors insisted women from every social circle had tried to capture his attention. None had succeeded. Some called him emotionally unavailable. Others believed he simply valued ambition more than affection. Vincent never corrected anyone. Love had always seemed unpredictable, inefficient, and unnecessary. As the brushed steel elevator doors began sliding together, he glanced at his watch. 6 o'clock exactly. Another flawless morning. Then a voice echoed across the marble lobby. "Please wait." The sound wasn't loud, but it carried genuine urgency. Vincent instinctively looked up. A young Black Maid hurried across the polished floor, clutching a canvas work bag against her shoulder while trying to balance a small paper sack in one hand. Her dark curls had slipped loose from a neat bun, and every hurried step revealed someone racing not for convenience, but for survival. The elevator doors continued closing. Without thinking, Vincent extended one hand. The motion sensors caught his gesture, and the doors paused only inches apart before slowly reopening. The woman stepped inside, breathing hard as she tried to steady herself. "Thank you," she whispered between breaths. Her voice was warm despite the exhaustion. She looked down immediately, avoiding eye contact as though she had spent years learning that invisible people stayed safest. Vincent simply nodded. The elevator began its smooth ascent. Neither of them spoke again, yet the silence felt strangely different from every other morning. Vincent found himself noticing details he normally ignored. Her housekeeping uniform was spotless despite its obvious age. One sleeve had been carefully stitched by hand. Her work shoes were polished, but worn around the edges. The paper sack she carried released the faint aroma of homemade oatmeal and cinnamon instead of expensive coffee from the cafe downstairs. She wasn't rushing because she lacked discipline. She was rushing because every minute clearly mattered. The digital display climbed past the 10th floor. The reflection in the stainless steel wall briefly caught her face as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind one ear. There was no designer jewelry, no carefully rehearsed smile, only quiet determination resting behind tired eyes that still carried remarkable kindness. For reasons Vincent could not explain, he looked away first. The elevator stopped on the 22nd floor. She stepped out quickly before turning back with a grateful smile that lasted no more than a heartbeat. "I hope you have a good day, sir." Then she disappeared into the hallway, leaving only the soft echo of hurried footsteps behind. The doors closed once more. Vincent continued toward the executive level, staring at the empty space where she had been standing only seconds before. He had attended international summits, negotiated billion-dollar contracts, and shaken hands with influential leaders without ever losing focus. Yet somehow, the image of a maid running toward a closing elevator refused to leave his mind. For the first time in longer than he could remember, his perfectly organized morning no longer felt perfectly ordinary. Amara Brooks reached the housekeeping office before anyone noticed the tears that had nearly formed in the elevator. She inhaled slowly, placed her canvas bag inside the narrow employee locker, and carefully removed the paper sack that held the oatmeal she had cooked before sunrise. She wrapped it again, with gentle hands, knowing it would stay untouched until lunchtime if she was lucky. Every dollar mattered. Every minute mattered even more. Her shift officially began at 6:15 each morning, but arriving even 2 minutes late meant losing the premium schedule that allowed her to finish early enough to catch the afternoon bus across the city. That bus took her to a small brick duplex where her mother, Evelyn Brooks, waited by the front window every evening with a smile that never revealed how much pain she quietly carried. Years of arthritis had slowly taken away Evelyn's ability to work, leaving Amara to shoulder every monthly bill alone. Before coming to Moretti Tower, Amara cleaned offices at night and stocked grocery shelves on weekends, sleeping no more than 5 hours whenever she could. The housekeeping position inside the luxury building paid slightly better than her previous jobs, but it also demanded perfection. She never complained. She simply kept moving. Sophia Reynolds, the housekeeping supervisor, entered with her clipboard tucked beneath one arm. She believed discipline was another form of kindness, and although her instructions sounded firm, every employee knew she was fair. 22nd through 26th floors today, Sophia announced. The executive conference rooms must be spotless before 8. We have investors arriving. Amara nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am. Within minutes, she pushed her cleaning cart through hallways lined with polished stone, oversized artwork, and windows stretching from floor to ceiling. Morning sunlight poured across the marble floors, creating reflections so bright they almost looked like water. Every polished surface reminded visitors of wealth, but Amara noticed different things. She admired the silence before the building filled with footsteps. She appreciated the scent of fresh flowers placed near every reception desk. She smiled whenever she found a forgotten coffee cup, because cleaning up after someone meant they still had another chance to enjoy their day. Around 7:30, while replacing fresh towels inside a private executive lounge, 2 administrative assistants passed through the hallway. They lowered their voices, believing no one paid attention to housekeeping staff. Did you hear? One whispered. Mr. Moretti actually held the elevator for someone this morning. The other laughed softly. Impossible. He barely notices anyone. Their footsteps faded, but the conversation remained with Amara longer than she expected. She immediately realized they were talking about the man she had met only an hour earlier. She had not recognized him at first. She had simply seen a well-dressed gentleman who had shown unexpected courtesy. The realization made her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She replayed every second inside the elevator, wondering if she had spoken too casually or breathed too heavily after running across the lobby. Then she quietly smiled to herself. No matter who he was, he had shown simple kindness when he could have ignored her completely. Meanwhile, several floors above, Vincent Moretti sat alone inside his glass-walled office overlooking the Chicago skyline. Reports lay open across his desk, yet his attention drifted toward the security monitor displaying the lobby below. Employees entered in steady waves, each carrying briefcases, laptops, or paper cups filled with expensive coffee. Without fully understanding why, his eyes searched the crowd for one familiar housekeeping uniform. He had spent years mastering focus, but this morning his disciplined routine had been interrupted by someone who would probably never realize the quiet impression she had left behind. The following morning arrived wrapped in the pale gold light of another Chicago sunrise. But for Vincent Moretti, nothing felt quite as predictable as it had only 24 hours earlier. His calendar remained filled from 7 in the morning until well after sunset with executive meetings, investment reviews, and charitable foundation briefings that had been scheduled months in advance. Normally, he approached every appointment with unwavering concentration. His assistants often joked that he remembered financial projections better than birthdays, although no one ever dared say such things in front of him. Discipline had built everything he owned, and emotions had never been allowed to interfere with that discipline. Yet as his car rolled into the underground garage beneath Moretti Tower, Vincent found himself checking the digital clock on the dashboard. 5:58. He stepped from the vehicle with his usual composed expression, while his security team quietly followed several steps behind. The polished concrete floor reflected the overhead lights, and the familiar silence greeted him like an old companion. He entered the lobby, adjusted the cuff of his white dress shirt beneath his tailored navy jacket, and approached the private elevator. The doors slid open immediately. He stepped inside alone, but instead of pressing the close button, his hand remained suspended for a brief moment. He did not understand why. His logical mind dismissed the hesitation as coincidence, yet another part of him waited. Several seconds passed before hurried footsteps echoed once again across the marble floor. Amara Brooks appeared carrying the same canvas work bag, although this morning she was not running quite as desperately. She slowed when she saw the elevator doors already open. Surprise crossed her face before she offered a polite smile. "Good morning, sir." Vincent answered with a small nod. "Good morning." The exchange lasted only 2 words from each of them, but somehow it felt more memorable than conversations he had held with influential leaders over expensive dinners. As the elevator climbed, Amara stood respectfully near the corner, careful not to invade his space. She noticed a tiny fingerprint on the polished stainless steel beside the control panel. Without thinking, she reached into her apron pocket, removed a clean microfiber cloth, and gently wiped away the smudge. She smiled with quiet satisfaction before placing the cloth back into her pocket. Vincent watched the simple gesture through the mirrored reflection without saying a word. Most people only performed their duties when someone important was watching. She had done it because she genuinely cared about doing the job well. The realization lingered in his thoughts long after she stepped off on the 22nd floor with another warm, sincere wish for him to have a pleasant day. Several hours later, Vincent stood beside the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office while downtown traffic moved steadily below, like streams of light flowing through the city. His longtime chief operating officer, Daniel Foster, entered carrying a stack of contracts. Daniel had worked alongside Vincent for nearly 15 years and understood him better than almost anyone. He placed the documents on the desk before studying his friend with quiet curiosity. "You have been distracted since yesterday," Daniel observed calmly. Vincent looked up. "Have I?" Daniel smiled faintly. "You have reread the same page 3 times, and you have looked toward the hallway every time the housekeeping carts rolled past your office." Vincent almost denied it before realizing there was no point. Daniel rarely made careless observations. Vincent glanced toward the closed office door. "Tell me something," he said after a thoughtful pause. "How long has the young housekeeper on the executive floors worked here?" Daniel raised an eyebrow, but answered without teasing him. "About 8 months. Her name is Amara Brooks. Excellent employee. Never late. Never complains. Everyone speaks highly of her." Vincent lowered his eyes to the papers spread across his desk, yet none of the printed numbers held his attention anymore. For the first time in many years, he found himself wanting to know the story behind someone whose name had suddenly become impossible to forget. The rest of the week unfolded with quiet consistency, yet Vincent Moretti began noticing something he had overlooked for years. Every morning, before the first executives arrived, and before the lobby filled with polished shoes and expensive briefcases, Amara Brooks was already moving through the building with calm determination. She greeted the overnight security guards by name. She paused to straighten magazines that guests had left scattered across reception tables. She adjusted fresh flowers whenever a single stem leaned too far to one side. None of those tasks appeared on her official checklist, but she completed them anyway because she believed every person deserved to walk into a space that felt welcoming. Vincent never announced his presence. From the upper balcony overlooking the main lobby, he occasionally found himself observing the quiet rhythm of her work before beginning his own meetings. It puzzled him that someone carrying so many responsibilities could still find time to notice small details everyone else ignored. One Thursday morning, an elderly maintenance technician struggled to carry a heavy box of replacement light fixtures across the service corridor. Several employees hurried past, focused on answering phone calls or checking emails before the workday officially began. Amara immediately set aside her cleaning cart and walked toward him with an easy smile. "Please let me help you with that, Mr. Harris," she said. "Your shoulder was bothering you yesterday." The older man chuckled. "You remember everything, do you not?" She laughed softly while taking one side of the box. "Only the important things." Together they carried it the rest of the way without another word. Hidden behind the corner leading toward the executive hallway, Vincent had witnessed the entire exchange. There had been no audience, no expectation of praise, and certainly no possibility that helping the maintenance technician would improve her position inside the company. She had simply chosen kindness because it came naturally to her. Later that afternoon, Vincent crossed paths with Sophia Reynolds while reviewing renovation plans for several executive floors. "Your housekeeping team continues to impress me," he remarked, keeping his tone casual. Sophia smiled with quiet pride. "They work very hard." Vincent nodded once before asking what seemed like an ordinary question. "Amara Brooks appears especially dedicated." Sophia's expression brightened immediately. "She is one of the finest employees I have ever supervised. She volunteers for extra shifts whenever someone becomes ill, never complains about difficult assignments, and somehow still encourages everyone around her." I have tried to promote her twice, but she politely declined because changing schedules would interfere with caring for her mother. Vincent absorbed every word without interrupting. That evening, as employees prepared to leave, a sudden summer rain swept across downtown Chicago. Through the towering glass windows of the lobby, people rushed outside holding umbrellas while others called for rideshares to avoid getting wet. Amara quietly stood beneath the entrance canopy, opening her worn backpack to remove a neatly folded rain poncho. Instead of waiting for transportation she could not afford. Before putting it on, she noticed a young intern staring anxiously at the storm with only a thin folder covering her head. Without hesitation, Amara walked over and offered the poncho with a gentle smile. "You take this. I only live a few bus stops away." The intern shook her head. "But then you will get soaked." Amara simply smiled again. "Rain dries. Kindness stays." She stepped into the steady rainfall carrying nothing but her canvas bag, while the intern stood speechless beneath the shelter. From the executive entrance on the opposite side of the lobby, Vincent watched every second unfold. The chauffeur waited beside his luxury sedan with the rear door already open, but Vincent remained completely still. For reasons he could no longer dismiss as curiosity, the image of Amara disappearing into the rain without expecting anything in return stayed with him long after the streets below reflected the evening lights of Chicago. Monday arrived with clear skies and crisp air drifting across downtown Chicago, but inside Moretti Tower an invisible shift had already begun. Vincent Moretti still followed every meeting on his calendar, approved every proposal placed before him, and greeted every executive with the same composed professionalism that had earned him respect throughout the business world. Yet between conference calls and financial reports, his thoughts wandered towards someone whose name had quietly settled into his mind. He did not understand why one employee among hundreds continued to capture his attention, and his practical nature refused to accept feelings without evidence. If there was something different about Amara Brooks, he wanted to understand it through facts rather than assumptions. Late that afternoon, after the final board meeting concluded, Vincent invited Daniel Foster into his office. Sunlight stretched across the walnut conference table while the Chicago skyline glowed beyond the towering windows. Daniel noticed the thoughtful expression on Vincent's face before either of them spoke. "You have another question," Daniel said with an amused smile. Vincent folded his hands calmly. "Tell me about Amara Brooks." "Not rumors. Only facts." Daniel nodded. "She has worked here for 8 months. Perfect attendance except for one day when her mother was admitted to the hospital for routine treatment. She volunteered for extra holiday shifts so co-workers with young children could stay home. She has never received a complaint from a tenant or an employee." Vincent remained silent, encouraging him to continue. Daniel opened a personnel summary. "She declined 2 promotions because they required evening hours. She said her mother depends on her after work." Human Resources also noted that she anonymously donated part of her annual employee bonus to the Emergency Assistance Fund for another staff member whose apartment caught fire. Vincent slowly leaned back in his chair. "Anonymous." Daniel nodded again. "No one knew it was her until accounting accidentally matched the paperwork months later. She asked them not to mention it." The room grew quiet. Vincent had spent years surrounded by people eager to advertise every generous gesture they made. Recognition often seemed more valuable than kindness itself. Yet Amara had deliberately hidden hers. That evening, Vincent chose to leave the office later than usual. As he crossed the executive corridor, he noticed movement inside one of the conference rooms. The lights were still on. Curious, he paused near the open doorway. Amara stood alone, carefully arranging every chair into perfect alignment after an event had ended hours earlier. She stopped for a moment, picked up a framed family photograph that had been accidentally knocked sideways, gently polished the glass with a soft cloth, and returned it to its proper place. Before leaving, she looked around the room one final time with quiet satisfaction, making certain everything was ready for people she would probably never meet. Vincent remained unseen as she pushed her cleaning cart into the hallway. Moments later, he entered the empty room himself. Everything felt unusually peaceful. The polished wood reflected the warm overhead lights. The fresh scent of lemon and cedar lingered in the air. Even the smallest details had been cared for with remarkable attention. For the first time, Vincent realized that excellence did not always announce itself through impressive titles or expensive suits. Sometimes it revealed itself in invisible acts completed with patience when no one was watching. As he looked toward the doorway where Amara had disappeared only seconds earlier, one unexpected thought settled quietly into his heart. He was no longer searching for a reason to notice her. He was searching for another chance to see her. 2 days later, the steady rhythm of Moretti Tower changed in a way no one expected. The morning began like every other one, with polished marble floors reflecting the first rays of sunlight and employees moving quietly toward another demanding day. Vincent Moretti arrived precisely on schedule, but as he crossed the lobby, something immediately felt different. The elevator doors opened, yet the familiar voice that usually offered a gentle "good morning, sir," was missing. He waited a moment longer than necessary before pressing the button for the executive floor. It should not have mattered. She was simply one employee among hundreds. Still, the unexpected silence lingered with him throughout the morning. By noon, Vincent found himself looking toward the hallway each time a housekeeping cart rolled past his office, only to realize it belonged to someone else. Finally, during a brief break between meetings, he called Daniel Foster into his office. "Has Amara Brooks taken vacation?" Vincent asked, keeping his tone measured. Daniel looked surprised before checking his tablet. "No vacation request. According to today's attendance report, she called in before dawn." Sophia noted it was an unexpected family emergency. Vincent nodded once, but the answer brought him no comfort. Across the city, Amara sat quietly beside her mother inside a small outpatient medical clinic. Evelyn Brooks smiled with the same gentle warmth she always carried, even while trying to hide her discomfort. "You should be at work," she whispered. Amara squeezed her mother's hand. "You are more important than any schedule." Evelyn sighed softly. "You work harder than anyone I know, sweetheart. One day I hope someone remembers to take care of you the way you always take care of everyone else." Amara smiled, though her tired eyes revealed weeks of exhaustion she had carefully hidden from the world. "I am all right, Mom. As long as we keep moving forward together, everything will work out." After several hours, the doctor reassured them that Evelyn only needed additional treatment, healthier meals, and more consistent rest. Relief washed over Amara, but so did worry. Every appointment meant another unpaid hour away from work, another bus fare, another careful adjustment to an already fragile budget. By the time she reached Moretti Tower the following morning, she had slept barely 4 hours. Even so, she arrived with her uniform perfectly pressed, her shoes polished, and the same quiet smile she offered every person she passed. Vincent noticed the faint shadows beneath her eyes the moment she stepped into the elevator. "Good morning, sir," she said as always, although her voice carried unmistakable fatigue. He studied her reflection in the mirrored wall for a brief moment before asking a question that surprised even himself. "Is everything all right?" Amara hesitated, clearly unaccustomed to personal questions from the company's owner. Then she answered honestly, "Yes, sir. My mother had a medical appointment yesterday. She is feeling better now." Vincent nodded gently. "I am glad to hear that." The elevator continued upward in comfortable silence, yet something had changed between them. It was only a few exchanged words, nothing more, but they carried genuine concern instead of routine politeness. When the doors opened on the 22nd floor, Amara offered another grateful smile before stepping into the hallway. Vincent remained inside as the elevator continued climbing, watching the doors close slowly between them. He had spent years believing that success was measured by balance sheets, buildings, and carefully planned decisions. Yet the quiet relief he felt after hearing that one simple sentence, "She is feeling better now," seemed more valuable than any business victory he had celebrated in recent memory. And for the first time, he began to realize that caring about another person's well-being was not a distraction from life, but perhaps the very thing that gave life its deepest meaning. Over the following week, subtle changes began spreading through Moretti Tower, although almost no one understood where they had started. Employees noticed that fresh fruit and healthy snacks suddenly appeared every Monday morning inside the staff lounge. The old coffee machine that had broken down months earlier was quietly replaced with a newer one. The housekeeping storage room received brighter lighting, lighter cleaning equipment, and comfortable anti-fatigue floor mats that made long shifts easier on tired feet. Human Resources announced the improvements as part of a routine employee wellness initiative, but only Daniel Foster knew they had all been approved within a single afternoon after one brief conversation with Vincent Moretti. Vincent never mentioned the changes to anyone. He had no interest in receiving credit. What surprised him most was not the decisions themselves, but the reason behind them. For years, he had invested millions of dollars into expanding office space and developing new business ventures without giving much thought to the people quietly maintaining those spaces every day. Watching Amara had slowly changed the way he looked at the building he had created. One afternoon, while walking through the executive corridor after a client meeting, Vincent noticed Amara kneeling beside a large indoor planter. A small green leaf had fallen onto the polished stone floor. Most people would have walked past without giving it another thought. Instead, she carefully picked it up, adjusted the plant so it stood straighter, brushed a little dust from the decorative pot, and smiled softly before continuing down the hallway with her cart. Vincent paused for a moment. "Miss Brooks." She turned immediately. "Yes, sir." "Do. You always notice things that everyone else overlooks." She looked briefly toward the planter before answering with quiet honesty. "My mother used to tell me that if something has been trusted to your care, even for a little while, it deserves your best effort." Vincent absorbed every word. "That is a remarkable way to think." Amara smiled politely. "It simply makes the day a little brighter, sir." Before either of them could continue, another employee approached with several folders requiring Vincent's signature. The brief conversation ended as naturally as it had begun, but those few sentences stayed with him throughout the afternoon. Later that evening, Daniel entered Vincent's office carrying several finalized contracts. He stopped when he noticed Vincent standing beside the window instead of reviewing paperwork. "You are smiling," Daniel observed with obvious amusement. Vincent looked genuinely surprised. "Was I?" Daniel laughed quietly. "You have built companies, negotiated impossible deals, and solved problems that seemed beyond anyone else. None of those things ever made you smile without realizing it." Vincent remained silent for a long moment before answering with complete sincerity. "I spent years believing success was measured by achievements. Lately, I have begun wondering whether character matters far more than accomplishments." Daniel followed his friend's gaze toward the illuminated city below. "And someone helped you discover that?" Vincent did not immediately answer. He simply remembered the woman who greeted every morning with kindness despite carrying burdens no one could see, who noticed forgotten details because she cared, who treated strangers with the same respect she offered friends, and who never expected recognition for any of it. For the first time in his adult life, Vincent realized he no longer admired Amara Brooks only for her kindness. Somewhere between shared elevator rides, quiet conversations, and countless unnoticed acts of compassion, admiration had quietly become something much deeper, and that realization filled him not with fear, but with an unfamiliar sense of hope that made every morning feel like the beginning of something he had never imagined possible. The following Friday afternoon, Moretti Tower welcomed guests from across the country for a charitable leadership forum hosted inside the grand ballroom on the 35th floor. Crystal chandeliers scattered warm light across polished marble, while fresh white lilies filled the room with a subtle fragrance. Executives, community leaders, and nonprofit representatives gathered in tailored suits, exchanging handshakes and quiet conversations before the program began. Behind the scenes, Amara Brooks and the housekeeping team moved carefully through the elegant space, making certain every chair stood perfectly aligned. Every table reflected the soft glow of the lights, and every guest entered a room that felt peaceful. To Amara, no task was ever too small to deserve her full attention. While adjusting a place setting near the front of the ballroom, she noticed an elderly guest struggling to reach a dropped cane that had slipped beneath a chair. Before anyone else reacted, she quietly knelt, retrieved it with both hands, and offered it back with a warm smile. "Here you are, sir." The gentleman thanked her sincerely, his grateful expression brighter than any applause filling the room. Several attendees witnessed the simple exchange before returning to their conversations. None of them realized Vincent Moretti had seen every second from across the ballroom. Throughout the afternoon, his attention repeatedly drifted toward Amara despite his efforts to remain focused on the event. She moved with the same quiet grace he had come to admire, treating every visitor with equal kindness regardless of status or influence. Later, after the final presentation concluded and guests slowly departed, Vincent found Amara organizing supplies near the service corridor. The hallway was peaceful, illuminated by soft afternoon sunlight pouring through tall windows at the far end. He approached without his usual entourage, carrying only a folder beneath one arm. Amara looked up with her familiar smile. "Good afternoon, sir." Vincent returned the smile almost effortlessly. "Good afternoon, Miss Brooks. I wanted to thank you. Today's event could not have succeeded without people like you." Amara lowered her eyes modestly. "I was only doing my job." Vincent shook his head gently. "You always say that, but I believe you do much more than your job." For a brief moment, silence settled comfortably between them. Then Vincent spoke with careful sincerity. "There is an opening in our employee development program. It includes leadership training, tuition assistance, and opportunities for advancement. I believe you would be an excellent candidate." Amara listened respectfully before answering in the same calm voice that had first captured his attention inside the elevator weeks earlier. "I truly appreciate your confidence in me, sir. It means more than you know." Vincent waited, sensing another sentence was coming. She took a slow breath. "But I cannot accept it right now." He looked at her with quiet surprise. "May I ask why?" Amara nodded. "The program requires evening classes several times each week. My mother depends on me every evening after work. She has always sacrificed for me. Right now she needs me more than a promotion does." Vincent remained silent, allowing her to continue. "Success will still be there another day. Time with the people we love does not always wait for us." Her words carried neither regret nor self-pity, only quiet conviction. Vincent realized she was turning down an opportunity many people would chase without hesitation, not because she lacked ambition, but because she refused to abandon someone who had always stood beside her. He smiled with genuine admiration. "Your mother must be very proud of you." Amara's eyes softened. "I hope she is." As she gently lifted her cleaning cart and continued down the hallway, Vincent watched her disappear around the corner, understanding at last that the quality he treasured most was not her kindness alone. It was her unwavering sense of responsibility, her quiet dignity, and the remarkable strength to choose love over personal gain whenever life demanded a choice. In that peaceful hallway, without grand speeches or dramatic moments, Vincent understood that the woman walking away from him possessed the rarest kind of wealth he had ever encountered, a heart guided by character instead of circumstance. And he silently promised himself that if he ever earned a place in her life, it would be through respect rather than privilege. Several weeks passed, and autumn slowly painted Chicago in shades of amber and gold. Morning sunlight filtered through the towering glass walls of Moretti Tower, just as it had on the day everything quietly began. Employees crossed the marble lobby carrying briefcases and coffee cups, while the familiar rhythm of another business day settled over the building. Vincent Moretti stood beside the private elevator a few minutes earlier than usual, something he had never done before meeting Amara Brooks. He glanced toward the entrance with calm anticipation rather than impatience. Moments later, the revolving doors turned, and Amara stepped inside with the same canvas work bag resting on her shoulder. She looked healthier now. The long weeks of balancing work and caring for her mother had become a little easier after Evelyn's health steadily improved. Amara noticed Vincent waiting beside the elevator and smiled with genuine surprise. "Good morning, sir." Vincent smiled back without hesitation. "Good morning, Amara." It was the first time he had spoken her first name aloud. The elevator doors opened, and they stepped inside together. For a few peaceful moments, neither of them spoke. The gentle hum of the elevator accompanied the quiet city waking outside the glass walls. Finally, Vincent broke the silence. "May I ask you something?" Amara looked toward him with calm curiosity. "Of course." He took a slow breath, choosing honesty over carefully rehearsed words. "For many years I believed success meant always moving forward, always working harder, always reaching another goal. Then one morning, someone rushed toward an elevator, and without realizing it, she reminded me that the people we meet matter more than the schedules we keep." Amara listened quietly, her warm brown eyes reflecting sincere attention. Vincent continued, "You changed the way I see this building. You changed the way I see the people who work here. Most unexpectedly, you changed the way I see my own life." She lowered her eyes for a moment, clearly moved but unsure how to respond. Vincent spoke again, his voice steady and gentle. I admire your kindness, your integrity, your devotion to your mother, and the quiet strength you carry every single day. I do not expect an answer today, and I would never ask you to choose between your family and your future. I only hope that someday you might allow me the opportunity to know you outside these hallways, simply as Vincent. The elevator slowed as it approached the 22nd floor. Amara looked up with a smile that carried both gratitude and quiet emotion. Thank you for saying that with so much respect. She paused before continuing. The man I first met held an elevator door for a stranger. Since then, I have watched him hold doors open for many other people too. That tells me your kindness was never an accident. Vincent smiled, feeling lighter than he had in years. Would you have dinner with me one evening after your mother feels comfortable spending a few hours with her neighbor? Amara laughed softly, the sound bright enough to fill the quiet elevator. Yes, I would like that. The doors opened. For a brief second, neither of them hurried to leave. They simply stood there, smiling at one another as the morning sunlight reached across the polished floor. Weeks earlier, she had run toward a closing elevator because she feared being late. Today, there was no rushing at all. Vincent stepped aside, inviting her to exit first as he always had, but this time she stopped beside him instead of walking away immediately. Together, they entered the hallway, not as the powerful owner of the building and a housekeeper separated by titles, but as two people beginning a journey built on patience, dignity, and mutual respect. And on that quiet autumn morning, inside the same elevator where two strangers had once shared only a few polite words, both of them discovered that the greatest changes in life rarely arrive with noise. They begin with one simple act of kindness, one sincere conversation, and one heart willing to see the quiet beauty in another.